Thank you for coming. We're gonna gather next week as well. And then, Dwayne, you know there's a little PowerPoint that we're going to run with this? Oh, Joy's got that? Okay. Thank you, Joy. Lord, guide us in our time of conversation with Glenn and with one another. Thank you for beauty in this world, for you are the beautiful God, in whose name we pray. Amen. Glenn, tell us about yourself first of all. So a little bit of your educational background, and you are an artist, and so why don't you give us a little bit of story of who you are, why we would have you be the curator of our gallery. And put that microphone right next to you.
Right up here.
Right there.
Okay. I was just thinking, hearing your sermon out there in the foyer about love, about how much God loves us, absolutely.
Yep.
And from that outpouring of love comes the love that we give to one another. And I look back when you're old like me, you look back and try to.
How old are you?
I'm 67.
Oh, that's not old, is it? Is that old?
To me, it is.
Okay, let's take this away. Dwayne, can you get him up on 2? 2? Now talk.
Okay.
Now we got you.
Very good. Thank you.
Put that in your pocket or something.
So you look back and try to figure out, how did I get here? And I remember little snippets of my childhood watching my father draw pictures. And this is my earliest recollection. I don't know how old I was, but I was fascinated. And there was something about seeing him draw something that became something. He was making a picture with his hands, and I was just a little boy. And it made a huge impression on me. And I was fascinated, and I wanted to do that because that's something that my father was doing. Later on, I was encouraged by the artwork that I did from my peers, and recognize that you're good at, you pursue that, right? In order to be loved. I think that's the undercurrent of all of our lives. We're trying to be loved. So the be political or whatever. So that was an encouraging thing. My family on my mother's side, several of them became pastors. And my uncles, and there was a history of the ministry on my mother's side. I was planning on going to a secular school in West Virginia when I graduated from high school, and I was driving to a friend's house, and God spoke to me at a traffic light. This is one of those thin places that you don't really realize until later. And he said, go to Asbury College. So that was the place that everybody who wanted to study to be a minister in my family history went. My grandmother came from a holiness background. She was a holy roller. And she was the person that showed me what a Christian is. And I am so thankful for her prayers throughout my life.
So at Asbury, did you pursue an art degree?
I went to Asbury.
With Greenwich's Finest with Valerie, right? Back in the day? So.
There's something about that place. My mother was praying that I would go there, so God said go to Asbury. I went there and was an 18-year-old kid that grew up in a steel mill country. So I was very naive about a lot of things, and I went there thinking that I was going to be a minister, just like all my other cousins and my uncles. And took a class in art, like an art fundamental course under a man named Rudy Medlock, who showed me and spoke to me and said that ministry is not restricted to the pulpit.
Amen.
And that opened my eyes, and I thought, and I heard somebody say at one point, my grandfather, he ran cattle on the Chisholm Trail. What a hard way to serve the Lord. And I thought, okay, no matter what you do, you're serving the Lord, right? Regardless of your profession, whatever you do. So it freed me up to pursue art as a form of ministry.
And then you have been an art teacher for a number of years, right? So vocationally, that was part of your both producing art, but then instructing others, right?
Yeah, I took as many different types of art classes as I could, from sculpture to clay to printmaking, everything that I could, with the idea of being able to teach this someday to somebody.
Yeah. Do you have a preferred, of those various media, do you have a preferred medium that you like to work in?
Right now, my medium of choice is photography.
Okay.
Or a photography like printmaking in a way.
Because you will, the layman's way, I would say, you goose up. When you take a photo, you will also do some work to develop that piece or that subject into something else, right?
Yeah. Metaphors and symbolism and storytelling. What I'm trying to do with my work is allude to something greater, to allude that there's something more to it than this.
Okay.
And it's a difficult profession to be an artist as well as a Christian. It's a very lonely place to be, because you're doing things that the church necessarily used to think about things like this, but
yeah, I mean, the church through the centuries has been the primary benefactor of the arts, right? In some ways.
Until the Reformation, and then for some reason they pulled that all out. They made a very pristine kind of a worship, emphasizing the word.
Was it the concern for graven images? I mean, that you would not make.
It was a confusion over that.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we'll loop back into some of your background, but 8 years ago we built the building. How many of you were here when we built the building? Okay, so some of you weren't. Okay, so we talked very intentionally about this lobby space. What's the lobby look like in most churches that you go to? Bulletin boards announcing activities that happened 3 months ago or a year ago, right? You know, one bulletin board would be an orphan and it would never get any love, you know, and it would just sit there with curled pages. We said, we do not want that lobby. What if we made it into a gallery? And I don't know that you and Jenny were here at the time, were you? Were you here when we opened up the building?
We started coming, I don't know how long ago, hon, about 6 years, maybe 7.
Yeah, but this is the building you came to. You didn't go to the old building, right? Yeah. And so little did we know that God was going to send an artist who would have and an art teacher, because you've been in private schools and Christian schools for a number of years, to be our curator. So we have, over the 8+ years that we've been in, we've had a variety of pieces of work on the wall, but nothing like we have in the recent years. And so we've appreciated that. So have you? We should have talked about all this beforehand, but this is better. You've never curated a gallery before quite like this, right?
No.
And this isn't a huge gallery, I recognize, but
no, this is a dream. This is a real dream.
Yeah.
All the other churches I've been to, there were several churches in the past we've been to. I mentioned, can we use this space for for art, maybe. And it was not as encouraged as it was when I came to talk to you about this.
Yeah.
So I'm extremely thankful for Don and his willingness to tolerate me and my...
If you cut that ponytail off, I'm never talking to you again. But you're so the vision of the artist, man.
Well, it's not what you do or say, it's how you look.
That's right. So talk about your vision, your dream for the gallery, and then I think we've got a few pieces that we're going to have you talk us through.
This gallery is a way for us to learn how to love God more. The intention is that when you walk into this place, you begin to worship. As soon as you walk in the door, that's the idea. You're confronted with images that you have to think about. They're provocative. So you have to deal with what's out here, and hopefully, if you spend enough time with this work, it will bring you to a place where you can then come in here and get other forms of worship as well. The arts are a way to make visible the invisible, to manifest ideas and truths that we don't normally see or feel or even think about. Music, poetry, dance, painting, any of those things are opportunities for us to learn how to love God more. The work that we are trying to show here is made by Christian artists in general, pretty much. I think all the work that we've hung since I've been doing this is in some way meant to get you thinking about God and His love for you. Now, there are all kinds of different types of styles, and in the art world, if any of you looked at an art history book, there are as many different manifestations of ideas and ways of thinking as there are people who are thinking of those ideas. When you come into an art gallery situation like this, it's helpful for you to be educated and have a little bit of, do your homework. When you go to a museum, you'll be confused by a lot of things unless you have done a little bit of previous homework. So I encourage, everyone who goes through this gallery to try to, get a little bit of background on particular movements in art and how can they, in this setting, how can they be redeemed to worship God? So that's my challenge.
But it's a tall ask because folks, normally when they're coming to church, very few churches that you attend over the course of your lifetime have a gallery as a part of that, right? I mean, like this is the only church I've been associated with that's had such. You might have a few paintings and pictures of an old minister or the church or whatever, but to actually intentionally. So the ask is big because most folks just walk in, get their bulletin, find their seat, and go to town. And so hence today, next week, and maybe you're going to talk us through, but maybe you're going to produce some materials for us so we don't have to go do the homework too much, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, if you look at this brochure, it's very good. Thank you, Becky.
Is Becky here? I don't know if I saw her this morning. So
get this on tape. Thank you, Becky.
She wrote a little, I guess, essay. I don't know how we would say it, a little thought piece.
After a session meeting and just walked around through here, and she's brilliant in being able to make sense out of what I was trying to describe to her. This, in essence, talks about how art in the church setting is. What are the three terms?
Goodness, beauty, and truth, the transcendentals.
Yeah, the three transcendentals, but she also mentions
she's got them highlighted.
Worship, evangelism, and discipleship. Right? How can can that be? Worship is kind of understood. Discipleship, though, is interesting to try to think how can art be used as in discipleship. Mainly, it's what it does with your mind and how it can transform the way you think about things. So, for example, the second painting.
How about we do this? Should we just go here?
Well, we can go here, but
Okay.
there's one piece out here that I don't have a slide of. It's called Haunted. It's a picture of a large face that seems to be decorated, almost like a mask. And behind this figure is a Eucharist set up. And that person is every man, right? With the knowledge of the salvation that is possible, but still denying it and still trying to avoid it and putting up this mask front. It's a very provocative image that I can talk about more next week. But the idea behind this show, it's called Inspired, and all the work is inspired work that is inspired by God. These artists have been inspired by something in order to create these pieces. And they've also been influenced by each other. The work out here is, there's an early piece by someone called Georges Rouault. He's a French expressionist. And the only example I have, because he's a big name artist, I was able to get a print on auction that I could afford. And that's an example of his work that was very influential to the artist Ed Nippers, who's got the majority of the work out here. Early on, Ed Nippers was greatly influenced by Georges Rouault's work. If we could run this slide here.
Why don't we trade so you can sit here and look at what's going to happen?
Well, I'm
okay.
This is the piece that's out there, and you can see that it's got black lines around the majority of the forms of the body, right? You see all those dark black lines. But then the spaces in between are almost lit, almost like the light is coming from within. This, Georges Rouault's father built stained glass windows. He was a stained glass artist. So little George, watching his father make stained glass windows, you can see the influence on this in this work. If you go to the next one, this is more of a colored image, but you can still see those dark outlines, and a light that comes from within is what he's talking about here. He was a very important artist, but during the time of Matisse and Picasso, early 1900s, he passed away in 1973, I believe. But his work, he's a Christian artist during the time of the French Expressionists and the German Expressionists, all early 1900s European art world. He was, I think, one of the only Christians that was in the group. So my friend Ed Nippers, the guy who did this other work, you can go to the next slide, was very influenced by him and his work. And you can see the outline.
So this is Ed Nippers right here?
No, this is still Georges Rouault.
This is still Rouault, okay.
Yeah. You see how he's painted the frame on this painting. And then if you go to the next slide, this is Ed Nippers' work. You can see the connection here, how he was influenced by Georges Rouault. Yeah, Ed was probably in his 20s when he did this painting. He just graduated from, got his master's degree and was teaching at Asbury, and I was a student, and he became my mentor. And now he's my big brother. But you can see the influence, painting the frames, the dark outlines, a very kind of not very three-dimensional feel to this. It's kind of flat because of those outlines. But you can see how the work of one artist will influence somebody else. And I tell my students that it's very subtle, but you influence, I mean, you'd be surprised how much you influence someone else just by the things you do, the way you talk, the things you decide to do in a group of people. And then you go to the next work. We had this one out in the lobby.
Yeah.
Now, Ed's come a long way since that first painting of Jesus and John. And this is the last of the slides, but this gives you an idea of that transition from.
But what are we looking at here? What's this piece?
This is Jacob wrestling the angel. And you see up here all this light and broken up color and everything coming in. This is his way of representing some kind of divine intervention into the world. You've got some very strong, formal, massive bodies in the mix here, but then this light, this broken up light comes in, and that's that place between the physical and the spiritual that I try to do a lot with in my own work. But that's what that light is coming in, broken up into different facets. It's almost, and that's his way of indicating a spiritual intervention into the world. So that's what that image is about.
And this piece, if I recall, is really big.
8 foot by 12 feet.
Do any of y'all remember this when we had this on the? Yeah. I think it was on this wall. I think for a while.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, was it over here?
This one was Peter's.
Oh, that's right.
Come and eat.
Yep.
Yeah. So the work that you see out here is Ed Nipper's work has influenced another friend of mine, Donald Shriver. You see his work out there as well. You can see the use of color and the brush marks, and especially in this piece that's, when we go in here, immediately to your left up against this wall. So the artists influence each other, especially when you're together and you see someone working over here. Can't help but pull the things that you like from that, right, and incorporate those things into your own work. So we can talk about this maybe more next week, and I can give more examples of
yeah, I think we're going to show, I mean, I think maybe have some of those pieces so that we can, instead of going out, because the lobby's always got lots of people in it. Yeah. Okay, my question, and then maybe we'll ask some questions from the room. What do you do with folks who walk in, look at this piece, and go, I don't get it. I don't get it. It's all like, okay, I can see this guy better than that guy. And then they just walk on. Yeah. What would you say to that person who doesn't get the piece of art?
Yeah. I would, it's very important to have titles and things written down to start a little bit of an inroad. Give something a title or write a description about what. It's very helpful as a curator to do things like that, to help people step into the work in some way or another. Title is very helpful. That gives you a trigger to make connections with the work itself. But like I said, you have to do your homework. You have to look at some things.
I don't want to do homework.
You don't want to
evangelize me.
Okay. What you have said by your comments about the work is not anything having to do with the work. You've just told me about yourself.
Don't judge me. We're going to do a little role play.
So it has nothing to do with the work. The comments that people have is amazing, but it's talking. They're just talking about themselves, right? So it shows me that this person maybe has not does not appreciate things that don't fit into a box. A lot of us, for our own protection, will decide on what something is, put it in a box, and then move on so that I don't have to think about this anymore. I've got this thing figured out, let's move on to the next thing figured out. And it's a way of rationally organizing your world, right? But art speaks to the mystery and the things that aren't seen. And that's what the artist is trying to get to. They're trying to transcend the piece itself and talk about something else.
Yeah.
A good work of art will transcend the medium. In other words, you have a drawing of a man, a person. Somebody will say, "Oh, that guy looks really sad." It's not a guy; it's a drawing of a guy. But when you see that and you're thinking about a person who's being sad or something, or it touches a part of you, see, then it's transcended to something else. It becomes something else. You hear a song that makes you get goosebumps. It's not because of the words of the song. It's how it's transcended those words and become something greater, right? Something much larger. And that is what the arts is talking about. It's taking the place between the word and the flesh is where art exists, somewhere in there.
Yeah, so philosophically, theologically, we talk about the immanent realm, that which we can see, the transcendent realm, that which we cannot see, immanence and transcendence. And when I was in seminary, some of our professors would talk about the difference between the Greek mentality and the Hebraic mentality. The Greek mentality is logic, the logos, right?
Yeah.
We want boxes, we want categories. So Paul in Romans is making an argument. Jew, 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 Jew. The Hebraic mentality tells stories which conjure up images. So Jesus speaks really in a more Hebraic way. He's not logically going after the Pharisees. He tells a story and another story, and he answers a question with a question. Yeah. And so I wonder if some of, the person who walks in and says, "I don't get it," is revealing, I live in the world of logic and categories and boxes and accounting and figuring it out. And I hear you saying, and you're more of a Hebraic thinker, you would be more, well, what is that person saying about themselves? Don't judge me, but this, it's inviting people to step out of a world that they've inhabited, which is really hard.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, it's because we live by the habits and conventions that we form over time. How many of you have ever looked at a piece of work and said, "I don't get it"? Okay? That's most of us. That's what I'm saying. Don't judge me. I'm there with me.
Yeah.
And so I think most of us tend to say, okay, now that we know the title, I mean, if we didn't know the title, Jacob wrestling the angel, where would we go with this? Would we have gotten there? But once you say Jacob wrestling with the angel, now, okay, who's Jacob and who's the angel? Everybody raise your hand. Who thinks the person on the right is Jacob? Who thinks the person on the left is Jacob? Okay. Seeing Jacob's that way, yeah. Why do you think the person on the right is Jacob? What's the clues that are guiding you there? The human body. Steve said touching the hip. What? Okay. Yeah. Who's not letting go of who? Both of them are holding on, right? Yeah, he's got him gripped around the head, doesn't he? Okay. But the hip story, so you see the arm. Of course, Steve, you're a wrestler also, so is this a good move or not, right? He's taking him down. And so on the right, you could imagine, and I don't know if, but this is how I've processed this, right? Because I stood in front of this piece for a long time when it was up. you could see that the right hip might end up being wounded somehow. In the yanking of the right thigh or leg, okay? Maybe there's a halo over maybe there's a halo that signifies. And the light is shining on both of them, right? But it shines first on the figure on the left, right? Yes. Well, the person on the right is, you've got mostly, isn't that mostly unbroken, right? The body and all up here, right? Whereas, boy, where's the torso? That's interesting. And why would the artist do that, Glenn? Why would an artist?
Well, you see, the form of the body is evident in Jacob.
Yes. So
But
you agree
the
it is
angel,
Jacob?
like I was saying, this way that everything breaks up, and instead of becoming form, it just turns into light.
Yeah.
And it's very.
But not just light. It's refracted light. It's the spectrum. It's the colorful light, which I think suggests the beauty and transcendence of God, right?
Yes.
At some level.
Yeah.
But the feet are not. The feet are not fragmented in any way.
No, they're on the ground.
Yeah.
I mean, this is happening on the ground. But there is this intervention,
So a
divine
wrestling
intervention.
match between Jacob and the angel, but then you've got a very solid earth and a transcendent, everything that goes up, right?
Yeah.
So you've got a horizontal expression going on here, but then isn't the ultimate wrestling between heaven and earth, right? I mean, earth and heaven at some level,
Yeah.
right? So that's some ways that I was trying to make sense of this one.
I also see the figure on the left has a higher stance
Ah,
on the level. They're not on equal standing.
yeah. And we've got a knee here, so he's been taken to the ground. So do we have any points scored yet, Steve, on the? Not yet, okay. All right. What do you say? Guy on the left, yeah, certainly some leverage going on there, right? On the higher ground. Yeah.
One of the things that Ed told me about making a work of art is that it should pull you from across the room. The first thing, it was the impact of the composition and just the design of the work should be provocative and compelling enough for you to come in
Yeah,
and get closer.
to walk towards it.
Get closer.
I like that. That's
and then,
great.
When you get up, so you've had your main course in the idea of the work, but then if you get up this close to the work, then you start to see the paint and the surfaces and the colors and the richness of all the surface. And he says that's the dessert that you get. So you have a huge entree that almost kind of slaps you upside the head, and then you're compelled to come up closer, and then you see the richness of the work.
Some
the
other
paint
pieces
surface.
that have caught my attention with this. You don't see, if the person on the right is Jacob, which I think that's what's going on, you don't see Jacob's face, do you? So you only see the face of the angel here, but that face of the angel almost looks like that's like Christ, our crowned Christ almost. It suggests that a little bit in places. And what happened out, so not only was his hip, he was wounded, but this is when his name changed, right? Jacob, the grasper, the wrestler, he turns out and he comes out as Israel now, the one who strives with God and overcomes. And so this might be the moment of the faces changing. Your face of being a grasper and a deceiver, there's a shift. And so the only face you see is actually the face of the angel, and that halo kind of is hiding it. So I was like, I'd like to ask the artist about that. And usually they say, well, if it says that to you, then that's what it is. Right?
Yeah.
Don't you hate when the artist says that? Don't you want to say, yes, that's exactly it? Every time I ask you these kind of questions, you go, well, I don't know. It could be, but it could be something else. Okay, Jesus. Okay, answer my question with a question. Any questions? Yeah, Clyde?
There are false prophets in every walk of life. What criteria is used by artists or judges to determine whether what you see is not a good artist or a bad artist, but an artist and a con artist?
Huh.
For instance, there are many pieces of art that are geometric forms, diagonal, with one color on one side and one color on another. Now, a child could do that, or somebody who's just trying to get the public to pay his way in life can do that. How does somebody decide that this is true art? So there's emotion in there, there's a story in there, or this is just somebody putting a piece of
How did Jackson Pollock get paid? Right? We're just splattering some paint. Come on, man, are you
go into a
kidding me?
museum and you see all this different type of artwork. The museum is kind of a repository for art, and it talks about, is more of a place to expose cultures and ways of thinking. So they'll have examples of art that reflect a particular way of thinking. The philosopher will come up with the way of understanding life. But the artist takes that philosophy and translates it into something that the rest of us can then understand that philosophy. So some of the work that is out there that it causes some kind of confusion is because of what they're representing, what they think is important. And a lot of the modern artists are existentialists and nihilists and people who don't see the world as through Christian eyes. So a lot of it is a lie. A lot of it is a lie.
But it still may be celebrated by the world. So,
Oh, absolutely.
right? I mean, so
Yeah. There are criteria in the world of art, composition, use of the technical aspect of creating the thing itself is important, but this transcendent quality is the thing that alluding to something else is what the artist is they're trying to tell you how they think about life in a visual way. It's a very difficult thing to do.
But some artists are only recognized posthumously, right? They don't catch the full recognition. They're celebrated more after they're gone, which is
because they don't have a way to defend themselves, and people make up a lot of stuff after you're gone, right?
I guess.
What a great guy old Glenn was.
Well, Glenn, he was a swell guy.
Yeah.
Man, that ponytail he had was so cool.
Yeah, but even though he was.
Yeah. But there's probably some very banal and mundane aspect to this. You got to know some people, right?
Well,
Why do some artists break through and others not? Why do some singers break through and some not? And what does breaking through even mean?
Because it's not what you do or what you say; it's who you know.
Who you know, and yeah.
And a lot of people were in the right place at the right time, etc. A lot of the way that the devil works is, manipulating and confusing, and when you go into a museum and you're confused, where does that come from?
I'm usually confused because I can't find the exhibit I want. When I go to the National Gallery, I'm always turning that map around. That's my confusion. Then I find it and I'm happy. So, other questions or two? Yeah, Jim, and then come to David.
Can you go back up a slide? Can you go to the one with the frame that you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that facial feature, that face is very unique. I mean, the nose structure, the face, it looks just like a mask out there. Like the shape of that face looks like a mask. Was the same artist?
Yeah, all of the work that's out on this wall and that wall are all done by Edward Nippers.
Yep.
And that's an Ed head. Every time that's what I
Ed
call
head.
him. That's an Ed head. Very, you'll see that solid, kind of a generic in a way, but face is.
Is there anything unique about that this doesn't have the mask, the painted part of the mask where that's hiding who he is? This one is not.
No, that's John on Jesus' shoulder, and I really like the compassion of
Do
this.
you see that? Did everyone see John?
John,
So we're at the Last Supper, and this is John, the disciple he loves, leaning on Jesus' shoulder. And so you see the bread and the cup, which of course wouldn't have been round bread probably, it would have been flat bread, right? But you know, speaking to our culture. So do you see that, Jim? So there's a sideways Ed head, right? That's Jesus, and then John at supper. Yeah, yeah. David,
Yeah.
David had a question?
So more of a process question, but with Jacob and the angel specifically, how long, do you know anything about the process of how that goes from just an idea to 8 by 12 foot?
yeah. There's another artist out here, Howard Finster, and I have one example of his. If you look up his work, he's a Baptist preacher from Georgia. We'd call him a primitive artist, untaught, but he was a visionary, and I think Ed is one as well, where the image comes, God brings this image to you, and a rough image, I would say, and he's got an 8-foot by 12-foot, 3 4x8 panels basically up on his easel, and Ed will take this vision and a long-handled paintbrush with black paint and draw on the we'll call it a canvas. Draw on the canvas until he gets the drawing right. He doesn't sketch. A lot of artists make a lot of sketches. It's just the way that Ed does this, and will draw this image out that he sees in his head. And the artwork will eventually take over and start to dictate what things should go where. But the initial inspiration comes from a vision from God that Ed gets.
Well, that's the equivalent of a songwriter sitting at the piano and just plink, 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 plinking until, okay, I like that little sequence of notes. I like that
Or they'll
phrase.
get a tune in their head
Yeah,
from who knows
from
where.
somewhere.
Well, we
and
know
then
where.
and then it comes out. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's a process. He builds this with layers and layers. It takes some pieces take a year. Some
Wow.
some come out quickly. But you can see that there are a lot of layers of paint. And if things become too contrived looking, one of the things that Ed does is he'll wipe his brush off on a piece of newspaper and get paint on it, and then just stick it on the canvas and rub out this whole.
Wow.
This thing that he was becoming too something that he didn't want. And he'll just rub the whole thing out. So it'll create another layer of color
Wow.
and another layer of mystery, but then he'll go back in and work on top
But
of
that
it.
which was before is still part of this work then.
Yes.
Which like a writer probably crumpling up the paper and throwing it, those words and those images or those thoughts are still part of what's going to happen.
There's a word for that, and it's like something that's been rubbed out. You can kind of barely see what was going on underneath something. There's a term for that. I should know that, but maybe next week.
That's why that was a great segue into setting the hook for them to come back next week and discover what this word is.
Yeah.
That Glenn can't remember right now. So next week, I think we're going to have pictures of. You're going to kind of talk us through the gallery.
I will explain
here.
why in the world I put those pieces where
Yeah,
I put them.
and do that. So, so pick up one of these if you didn't. We would note on the back we're inviting support. We just created a designated line item, just like we've got a music fund and a mission fund outside the budget to support because this is actually here for free or maybe nominal, but we've rented shows, and we've discovered it's not the show that costs as much as the shipping to get the to get the thing. So we're inviting your support for anyone who might have vision over time to create, an opportunity to see the gallery grow. So we're out of time. Thank you. We're going to be right here next week, same thing, but we're going to talk about the show itself. So Lord, thank you for Glenn. Thank you for his mentors, his influencers, and the way he has influenced countless people through his instruction and his own art, and influencing us today. And so we thank you, O God of beauty, goodness, and truth, for the way in which you manifest yourself in this world. Continue to increase our ability to perceive these transcendentals this day and forevermore. Amen.
Thank you, Don.